Do I do it? Do I scroll down to Melody? No, honestly, I don't really care about the other decks. It's just whether or not I want to spoil Melody. This is the first time that I've actually been super excited for, Fab content, to the point where I don't want to really spoil myself, right? But we obviously just got the video. The professor reveals all the cards of the deck, so, there can be, I think, 10 or upwards cards for every single hero that are new. And then, obviously, the deck lists have been updated on Fabtcg, and I'm so tempted, because obviously we're doing these lessons, and I'm building the deck without seeing the cards. So the fact that I have access to the cards now can completely reshape everything. But I've already got the final video lined up, right? Good to go. And this could just make or break it. Why don't we just read the comments a little bit? 100% responsible for making sure there are playsets of Majestics. That's great. So most likely 2 of every card. I did grab double, right? In case, there's ever some applicability to Classic Constructed, and I want, 3 of each. Very excited for the product. That's lovely to hear. Haven't had time to watch it. Working process, just Q&A. Oh, he did answer. That's awesome as well. Please, if you can, make a video. Yep, same thing. 4 cards are great for precons. Interesting. Foils aside from the weapons? Fused. Nah, they'll be simple enough to get into once you get your hands onto them. Anything else? No? Okay. Yeah, I think I'm gonna wait. I'm gonna wait till I get the physical box to go through Melody. We might look at everyone else's, and I'll just make sure I don't scroll too far towards Melody, which will be tricky for Ira. We'll probably just wait, right? But there are, obviously, I can straight away see some new cards. Anyway, onto the final part of our Melody lessons, right? An FTK or OTK combo that does not use copper. Did I manage to pull it off? Let's find out. Right, so welcome to the final lesson for Melody, at least until next week when the decks actually come out. So this is definitely going to be the most ludicrous and crazy setup you could possibly run for Melody, but it does absolutely cut out copper. Okay, which means that you can technically go for your first turn and try to get it off. And there are ways to try and make it consistent, not playable consistent, but sort of like a high roll or bingo deck. Yeah. So basically, on the left-hand side here, we have all the possible neutral draws. Okay, so you can use 1 resource to pay for gold and then go into Art of War. Art of War then discarding 1 other card or banishing it so that you draw 2, makes it neutral draw. Similarly, we can now run the Mage Master Boots because of Art of War, because we can take 2, right? So we can take the draw option, and we can take giving our attack go again. So we no longer need to run the Fleetfoot Sandals, freeing the slot up, meaning that we can run the Mage Master Boots to use Tome of Ferendale more consistently, because now we have access to that go again, right? As long as we have access to the go again, it becomes a neutral draw, which can then also be chained into another cash in, still remaining neutral, right? Because of the floating resource after we pay 2. Again, where we're always stipulating that we're running a mostly blue deck, so the majority of what we're pitching is always 3. Anything else sort of bogs it down. Then we also have the Lead the Charge into Tome, into Cash In. The good thing about Lead the Charge is you can run the blue variants and just use it once you proc your Cash In, right? So you play it with Cash In, you gain action point, not it gains go again, meaning that you can then stock it up and use it for a Tome. So then from this little section of cards, if you do manage to play every single line, you're pitching 5 cards. Then we can go into our normal cash out for another 4, generating silver off our equipment, and then into Final Act, having to pitch 1 more resource, meaning that in this setup, we pitched a total of 10 cards, meaning that each Final Act is hitting for 21 damage, or 42 in total, off of this setup, right? Again, the sort of ludicrous nature of having to find and chain these cards in the perfect order, although in saying that, right, the nice thing about them is you can use them in any sequence, because they all feed into one another off of the floating resources. Right? So you can use the gold to balance out the Art of War, but similarly, you can use the Mage Master and Tome to balance out the Art of War. You'd also use the gold into Cash In, meaning that as you find the pieces, you can play them in one of the correct orders, right? You don't have to draw them in a specific order, meaning that it is more flexible and easier to play as long as you are finding the cards, right? So every time you draw 2, as long as you're finding one of the next pieces, so to speak. Now, it does obviously seem like a long shot. So what you can do is rather than run Cash Out, right, if we scrap this, we no longer are generating the silver tokens, but it's fine. So our equipment also becomes more usable, right? We can take pieces that actually function. You can take the Blossom of Spring as your chess piece to then make Cash In easier to get off, because if you don't have the previous sequence cards, you can use the Blossom of Spring to generate 1 resource to pay for the Cash In and make sure that it is still a neutral draw off your pitch. But then you can also run Opt, right? So Seekers to equipment, right? as well as the ornate Tensen to cycle something if you get bogged down. Obviously, this doesn't make it perfect, but it does make it slightly more consistent because you can essentially play these, look for something, then go into your draw sequence, do it again, and so forth. And you can also use them as sequence starters because you can float resources off of them. And going down this line, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 cards pitched, meaning that each final act is doing 15, and you're doing a total of 30 damage, right? Again, this probably is the better one to go for, just to make sure that you are KOing your opponent, right? 42 damage is a bit more passable than just pressuring for 30 damage. But with that said, obviously this setup right now is probably a little bit confusing. So it's probably going to be easier if we play through things and I can sort of explain it a little bit better. So I'll probably take this setup first and we'll sort of go through the draw options and what plays you could make, and also how you could sort of fish on your first turn to try and go for an OTK. So here's the setup we're going to take. So the big thing, we're cutting out copper, and we're cutting out cash out, right? So we're not using cash out for the combo sequence, meaning that you can utilize all your equipment and we're not having to generate any copper, meaning that you can potentially play it on turn 1. So we're running the Crown Dominion, still for the gold token. There's no better head slot to run other than the gold token, right? If you had, endless draw, you could run something like the Halo Smiter, right? Because that allows you to pitch and pitch and pitch, right? You can activate it once, and since it's not destroyed till the end phase, you can continuously activate it to just dump your hand and get the pitch up, but there's no way to draw from that, so it's sort of an exercise in futility. Then we have the Seeker's Gillet, Mitts, and the Ornate Tensen, so that we can opt and cycle, and then the Mage Master Boots, so that we can chain Tome of Ferendale. Now, the only way this works, though, is if we get the Go Again off of Art of War. That way we can chain our final acts, because we no longer have the Fleetfoot Sandals or the Snapscaler Dragons. Is that what they're called? Either way, the big concept to get your head around for Melody is always drawing neutrally. As long as you can draw neutrally, you can pump up your pitch, right? So the way this is achieved is by floating resources effectively. So for instance, Art of War costs 1. To use its draw mechanic, you have to banish a card, right? So if you pitch, do the banish, you're now using 3 cards, right? The pitch card, the banish card, and Art of War to draw 2, making it a -1 in draw. However, if you're able to float 1 resource into it, you can make it a neutral draw. So for instance, if we were to play the Mage Master Boots into the Tome, so that's 1 resource, 2 resource, so we pitch, we're floating 1 resource, we've drawn 2 cards back, so that covers our pitched card and the Tome, and then we have that 1 floating resource to go into Art of War and make it a neutral draw. So that's the big objective, is to make sure that we always draw neutrally so that we can then go into the next set of cards, the next sequence, to then continue to inflate our pitch. The great thing about this is it's about recognizing what cards can go together. So for instance, gold being on the board rather than in our hand gives us a freebie, right? If we don't draw 2 combo pieces that can go together. So again, floating Tome into Art of War is 1, floating Tome into Cash In is 1, floating gold into either Cash In or Art of War is another way to get the combo off, and then floating 1 resource off the gold into Tome and lead the charge is another way, right? So it's all about making sure you get those resources floating. The other nice thing, right, we can then use the Mitts to try and look for the correct card to draw into, or the Ornate Tensen as, again, a way to sort of float resources, right? We still go -1, but you can get the resources floated to then go into something else. So for instance, off of the Ornate Tensen, right, we can float 2 resources, meaning that we can go Art of War into something else, right? Because we have the 1 extra resource to then make Cash In a neutral draw. We're still going -1 overall, but we have the resources floating to make the sequence work. The hope of running this playstyle is that you can sort of go for broke. So on your first turn, if you have Final Act in hand and any of the combo starters, right, you can then try and go for the combo. Again, if you don't draw into the next piece, so any of the other draw engines, you can then use the Ornate Tensen to cycle a card, or you can use Seekers to look for a card. And then you also have the option of gold to try and draw a card and look for something. So there are ways to, again, luck it, but overall this is going to be a very bingo deck, unless you stall out till you know you have the majority of combo pieces. Again, they have to be 1 and 2 cards, so essentially double the pieces. So if there's 8 cards here, plus 3, that's 11 cards. So it's effectively, right, playing the odds, it should be workable. So for instance, these are all the possible lines of play you can undergo, right, using these cards in different combinations. But the important thing is that you're cutting these cards from your deck, essentially, right? So you've got your combo pieces, just a final act, probably a cash out, right? Because again, silver's so powerful. And then encore, or another final act, right? So if you run max copies, 2 cash outs, again, it's blue, so it's fine to be pitched. 2 final acts and 2 encores, that's 6 cards. Okay, so 6 cards, from your deck straight away, plus a Golgarian Tome, right? So that's 7 cards. So you're left with 33. From that, if you run, again, 2 cash-ins, 2 tomes, 2 Art of Wars, that's another 6 cards gone, right? So from 33, we drop down to 27 cards. Include the Lead the Charge, and we're at 26 cards. We're also cycling a huge number of cards, right? 2 from the tome, 2 from Art of War, 2 from cash-in, meaning through them, we can see a total of another 12 cards, right? So statistically speaking, we are thinning it down and making it easier to pull the combo. Again, it is still very gimmicky. It's still very much a bingo deck. It is a possibility that is made more accessible, again, through the number of cards we're running, with the sole objective of not just being able to extend the pitch through these cards, but to use them in a combination way to burn them from our deck and to draw cards and burn other cards from our deck to make it easier to find and land the combo. The best way to do this is to then rely on silver as our main damage, right? Convert as much equipment as possible. We could even possibly cut out the Mage Master, right? Just run Lead the Charge and Tome, although you'd only want to run 1 copy of Tome then at that point, right? So you're adding 1 extra card to the pool that you have to cycle through, but you could then cash in 5 pieces of equipment, meaning you can cash in 5 pieces of equipment, right? So you're extending Final Act by 10 damage just off of silver, plus the 1 to pitch, another 2, so that's 12. So just through cash out and Final Act, you are now doing 26 damage, right? From finding 2 Final Acts, Final Act Encore, and cash out, you're doing 26 if you cut out the boots. If you keep the boots so you can run both tomes, you're still pressuring for 22 damage just off that section of the combo, right? You then chuck in any of these lines. So for instance, the biggest one down here being 3 pitched cards, right? Because this is banished because of Art of War. So all the ones to the right are banished, but 3, so adding an extra 12 damage off the 2 Final Acts, bringing you back up to that 34 points of damage. Now, there are ways to make this more effective. So again, the whole concept to try and follow through on is neutral draw or going positive, right? And this can be accomplished through also pitch stacking correctly. So pitch stacking is making sure that you have the correct amount of resources floating, right, to then convert these cards into neutral draws. Another thing you could do is you can use the gold to cash in. If you're using the gold to pay for cash in now becomes a positive draw, right, giving you 1 extra card to play with for all of the combo pieces. And then running into Mage Master Boots, into Tome, into Cash In, into Art of War, right, because you still have the floating resource after you play the Mage Master Boots. You pitch 1, you have 2 resources floating, meaning that, again, Cash In becomes a negative draw, but that's fine because we have the 1 extra card from the first Cash In. Art of War, neutral draw because you only have to banish a card now. And Tome, neutral draw because you've already pitched, right? So the best way to play this to burn the cards would be Mage Master Boots, into Tome, into Art of War. You'll then find to play the cash in, right? You pitch 2, you're floating 2 resources, you draw 2 cards back, and then you can go back into Tome, into Art of War, or Lead the Charge, Tome, into Art of War, right? And you still end with 3 cards in hand to then go with your combo. And this is most likely going to be one of the stronger backbones you can run in the deck, again, because you're thinning it out, making it easier for you to draw all the pieces for the combo. Lastly, why don't we just play out the ideal combo, right? So in hand, we'll start with a cash in, a tome, an Art of War, and a blue pitch ball, right? So again, we're using gold to pay for the cash in. That way we go positive in draw. So gold, pay for the cash in. We draw 2 cards, and we now have 5 in hand, right? Move them over a little bit so everything fits. So now that we have 5 in hand, we don't mind too much about going minus with something like Art of War. But we'll start off by playing the Mage Master Boots. So we'll put it up here. Right, we have to pitch. First pitch. We're now floating 2 resources, allowing us to play the Tome and draw 2 back. Again, remaining neutral. Then we can even play the Art of War. So we can play the Art of War. We pick 2. So we banish a card. Right, so we get to draw 2. So we'll take cash in. And we'll take Tome. And then our final act also has go again because we've picked the banish a card to draw 2. And your next attack gains go again. We're not going to play any attacks till final act. So that's safe, right? And that's why we could run the Mage Master Boots. We can then go into cash in. We play cash in. We have to pitch 2 cards this time, but it's fine because, again, our hand has gone positive. So back to 4. We draw another blue. And this time, say we draw Lead the Charge. We're still floating 2 resources off the cash in. So we can play Tome and Lead the Charge. Right, off of one another. That way the Tome has go again. We're still neutral, so we get to draw 2 cards. This time we draw Art of War and cash out. We still have 1 resource floating from the cash in, meaning that we can play Art of War. We play Art of War, we have to banish another card. This time we're picking the buff attack, because why not? 1 extra damage, sure. We get to draw 2 cards back. So now we say we draw Final Act and a random card. We can then play cash out, create our silver, so we can cash out our equipment. Crown, that's 1. Null Rune Robes, that's 2. Then the Null Rune Gloves, 3. And Then Teleshare for our 4 silver. We can then play all our 4 silver. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Each of them being pitch, draw, pitch, draw. So we pitch, draw, pitch, draw, pitch, draw, pitch, draw. Right, and that's the end of the sequence. So before we play Final Axe, what have we achieved? Again, we've milled a bunch of cards, right, to make the combo easier to find. Again, if we find, for instance, Gorgonian Tome or Encore, that's fine, they can substitute. And we already have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 cards in the pitch sub. We then pitch our last card and play our 2 Final Acts. So we have 8 cards in the pitch, meaning each Final Act gains 16 damage, plus 1 from Art of War and 1 from the base. So each Final Act is doing 18, and our turn is 36 damage. Again, less than if we rope in copper, but also easier to pull off and more consistent. Because again, the idea is that we burn through as many cards as possible from our deck. So on board, right, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 cards gone. Gorgonian Tome could have been played as well for 11 cards. And then we've also pitched 8 cards. So over half our deck goes into the combo, again, increasing the consistency at which we can pull it off. Now, while this is the sequence we've played, cards don't have to be played in this sequence. Again, it's all about balancing and making sure that we float enough resources so that we can play all the cards and draw neutrally off of them. Right, the only time we go -1 is after we play the cash in to go positive, so it's still balanced out. And then before we get to Final Act, we have 3 cards in hand, so 2 combo pieces, Final Act, or Encore, and then 1 pitchable to actually play them. Now, it's probably still better to go down the copper route, but I did like the challenge of trying to figure out a combo that works without the use of copper, right? Just disregarding Melody's own hero ability and just using her for the fact that you can play Final Act. And I'd say 36 damage isn't so bad. And the other option too as well is to cut 1 tome, don't worry about the Mage Master boots, and run another card you can convert to silver, or run items, right? Any of the items that have go again. So there are a few of the amulets, I think. I think the amulets have go again, or the talismans. I'll put them up on screen, right? At least one of them. They have go again. If you just pick the ones that don't have the ability to proc, that just sit on board, you can then save them to cash in, generate more silver, and extend the pitch further. That's probably one of the go-to ways to extend it, and you're also then cutting cards from your deck. Although in that scenario, right, you can't play them on the combo turn because they will act as -1 cards to the deck. Like usual, this variation will be in the description. Hope you enjoyed, and can't wait. Next week, we get the deck. Well, for me, it's probably 2 weeks, unfortunately. All right, mail on weekends. Releases always have to be on the Friday, right? Put it on the Thursday, I can just get express shipping, have it by the Friday. Oh well, it's fine. I'll move eventually and finally have an LGS where I can play socially. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed. If you got any other thoughts, right, or cards you think would work and function well in the deck, let me know. Either way, I hope you have as much fun with Melody as I will. See ya.